Good morning, everyone. My name is Mitch McCreary, Director of Marketing, and along with Dr. Christine Sun, President, and Dr. Iyad Alatar, we would like to welcome you to another Filtration Hour focused on sustainability. This hour is entitled Air Filtration, Filter Manufacturing, and ESG Metrics. I will be moderating this 90-minute talk with our chairperson, Dr. Iyad, the Strategic Director, Instructor, and Advisory Board member of Waterloo Filtration Institute. Waterloo Filtration Institute, WFI, is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to moving the filtration and separation industry toward a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable world. This slide shows our advisory board members from various countries. We also want to acknowledge our new ambassadors who, together with the advisory board members, encompass some 18 different countries and share our passion to build a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable world. We thank our internationally distinguished instructors and panelists for their tremendous effort over the past years. WFI proudly supports the industry with the most comprehensive and cost-effective education program called the Certified Filtration and Separation Specialist Program, or CFSS, covering all areas of the filtration market including media, technologies, design testing, evaluation, along with new developments, trends, and opportunities. Beside the professional specialist training, the Filtration Hour is another exciting education program we offer free to the public. If you have a filtration question, ask the experts at the Filtration Hour, which along with the CFSS program offers opportunities to advance your career in both the clean air and water filtration space. Stay connected and updated by watching videos or join the live discussion for free. We are excited. We have an exciting program for you today, along with our panelists. Dr. Swarna Agarwal, Senior Material Scientist at PTI Technologies. Dr. Ramaswamy, Technical Director at Level Engineering in Oman. Mr. Bruce Laurent, Global Marketing Director, IAQ at H&V. Mr. Paul Merrill, CEO of Aeritus Incorporated. Ms. Lisa Greenfield with Filter Pro, BDMM USA. Mr. Richard Linden, Secretary General of the Filtration Society in the UK. We hope that you will have an educational experience during our discussion and leave with some valuable, eye-opening information concerning the filtration market space. Our program today will begin with some basic questions for our panelists, and then we will open the discussion to the audience. At any time during the discussion, you may join our panelists on an open mic or ask questions through the Q&A bubble at the bottom of your screen. Now, a quick introduction of our chair of the discussion. Dr. Alatar is an instructor and member of the Waterloo Filtration Institute Advisory Board. In 2020, Eurovent Middle East appointed Dr. Alatar as his first associated consultant for filtration affairs. Dr. Alatar received an engineering degree from the University of Toronto in Canada, Kuwait University, and Loughborough University in the UK, respectively. He received his specialization in business and strategy from Harvard Business School. So, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Alatar for an opening comment.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate the introduction and welcome to all our panelists to the fact that they've availed themselves today Also, I want to welcome the audience from different countries and different time zones. What I'll try to do in the next 10 minutes or so is just set the scene and give more chance to the panelists to share more of their experiences. And let me just start by something that's very relevant to all of us. We all either live in cities or we plan to do so, but cities are critically important. They are the bedrock for development. We all know that 80% of the economic activities take place in cities. Unfortunately, 70% of the energy gets used in cities, and we need to reduce that. And we also have a major challenge, which is 2.5 billion people are expected to be added to the urban area by 2050. That's gonna place a lot of emphasis on how we live, how we urbanize, the way we generate and use power, so that we live in a city that is an opportunity to reduce waste in terms of land, energy, materials, resources, and even human potential. In the early 1800s, we were only 5 people living in urbanized area. Today, it's 54, and as I said, it's expected to be up to 70% by 2050. But there is another challenge. All what we're doing in terms of anthropogenic emissions, which is around 50 or 40% to 50%, depending on the pollutant. So this is all emitted from 2% only. So cities represent 2% of the Earth's surface. This is existing now. As we continue to urbanize, this is certainly going to have a more impact on our environment. So we move forward and say 2 things. We do not want to urbanize and get people out of areas into an urban area, but get them out of poverty and into pollution. So the premise is urbanized, yes, but yet polluted. And this argument was addressed by the 2 authors of this great book, Age of the City, addressing that there is a lot of people now clustering in cities. And we've seen how the pandemic has showed all the chronic errors and mistakes that we've made in the past. Also, another comparison that I like to share with you, he said that 250 people can fit in a single carriage on a New York subway, and this is how much or how many people would fit in a medieval village by that time. These are recent pictures when I was in the UK last time, and you can see this was off-peak and at rush hour. We think of so many things. We think of air quality issues. We think of how much air filtration can play as a role and how frequently we change filters. What do we do with the filters after that? Air filtration and air quality in so many applications has come into question during the pandemic, even in trains and subways, going through industrial areas as well. So this is gaining a lot of momentum. ESG metrics now playing a major role in addressing the role well and beyond what we can deliver, whether it's air quality for a specific application or a specific efficiency and a flow rate for another. So whatever we do in terms of treating the environment, whether we burn tires, generate power, or irresponsible fossil fuel combustion, all has to be looked at. Not just because we have filtration technologies, it's there to be used. Yes, like particle capture and pollutant capture is available, but that's certainly not the order of the day. We need to go back and examine the way we live and how we consume our resources. 2 things I want to say here. One, there's an application sensitivity to filtration, and therefore there is a technical aspect to it. We have to adhere to a certain metrics technically, but there also has to be a legal and ethical obligation to ensure that we are filtering air. At the same time, we are adhering to ESG metrics so that we are not stepping on anybody's lifestyle, benevolence, or rights. And this is the social aspect of things. So at the same time, we need to make sure when we look at performance of air filters, when we acquire filters, we need to look at sustainable air filter performance. which has a technical sort of connotation to it. And we will look at three things very quickly. We need to make sure we understand what we're looking at, what are we up against in terms of pollutants. We need to employ sensors, and we need to look at equipment, for example, HVAC systems that can adapt to human occupants and so on. So it's not just a systems that are on and off. We need to know what we are looking at in terms of indoor air quality that we are inhaling. We need systems that adhere to the energy efficiency. We need to look at or beyond particle capture to look at bioaerosol filtration. And eventually, after we use filtration as a tool, is that going to be a toxic disposal issue? Who would want to handle a filter that has biocontamination or toxic material? So as you can see, there are too many moving targets. Let me just address, and there's not much time to put everything in a blueprint here, but for sustainable air filter performance, what's really important to make sure that we understand what we are up against, look at the number of pollutants, and ensure that we have progressive sort of filtration, whether it's number of stages or the way we understand how to deal with concentration and particle size distribution of the pollutants we look at. Eventually, inappropriate selection will lead to unsustainable performance. And of course, inappropriate selection can lead to short-lived performance in terms of having a dust deposition or particle deposition landing or depositing on a depth filter. And this is first a waste of filter media. And at the same time, as you can see here, large particles that can be filtered at a much lower cost being filtered by an expensive or high efficiency filter. So this is on the technical term. We need to have sustainable filter performance. So we need to look at the lifetime of a filter. The lifetime of a filter, for example, when you look at heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and the absence of appropriate pre-filtration, you will have a short-lived filter. But when you reinforce pre-filtration, eventually you extend the lifetime. And basically what we're looking at is ensuring that each stage will be allocated sufficient time, and eventually you extend the use of an air filter. So the journey of a delta P initial to the final pressure drop is what we need to look at. And this is a life cycle, let's say, of a filter. What do we need to look at in terms of production, materials, distribution, eventually use? Everybody focuses on repurposing, recycling, and maybe reusing. Actually, what I need to highlight today with the panelists and with the audience is what's really important is to abandon the linear approach of take, make, use, and waste to extending the use, which is really very important, and that's related to sustainable filter performance. Just like we think a bathtub may be not usable anymore when it corrodes or rusts, we can always find a use for it. At the same time, we use a lot of filters in other applications like air intake for gas turbine. Again, they become a disposal issue. What do we do with this is something that we want to discuss today. A lot of filters are used nowadays in so many applications, and therefore we need to understand the responsibilities in every single stage, whether it's selection, manufacturing, testing, transport. What is the actual cost of a filter from day one until we go and dispose it? What issues we may face when we have to dispose a filter and put it back where it came from? Again, we have chronic filter failures. We've discussed this before. We have issues pertaining to the social aspects of maintenance teams, laborers. They're not usually part of the success equation. So we need to make sure that the ESG metrics come there to serve all purposes. So this is our good friend in the US, Mr. Stefan Nicolas. He's also one of our advisory board members, and I teach a course with him. And as you can see, he's fully equipped. Look at that. He's fully equipped. He's got the tools and the conditions. He's well protected. His well-being is as important as the air quality for the human occupants he's trying to serve, compared to another gentleman here who's just equipped with, a safety shoes, screwdriver, and a measuring tape. Another thing is here, this gentleman has been asked to regenerate a disposable depth filter, again, not only from a performance point of view, but also from an ESG metrics point of view. Eventually, when any wrongdoing is going to reflect on your air quality and your indoor space, so it's nothing there to hide. Eventually, it's going to reflect on your diffusers, on your coils, and your human occupants. As you can see, this diffuser is now full of dust on the back. So we use a diffusing system as a filter. What we invite you today to basically turn the table on its head, try to think in new ways of approaching filtration, trying to reimagine it from a knowledge point of view, not just a user experience point of view, from a design point of view, and not from a demand point of view, so that eventually we don't end up having equipment of that shape. I heard this all the time. If you have an indoor air quality problem, no problem. We can just reinforce more filtration. But today we'll discuss what is filtration in terms of cost, manufacturing, what are the problems and promises of air filtration that can really sets the stage to make appropriate decisions. There's a lot of hype today addressing urban design for air quality, whether it's street design, or the fact that we have cities that are more inclusive in terms of green regeneration or urbanization. Many publications have addressed that, but the most important one I want to share with you today is this quote. It's not what we know or what we can do, but what we actually accomplish. It's in fact the deed itself and what we can become in the future rather than what we are getting right now. As you can see here, another thing addressed in terms of urban quality is reducing the emission from transport by allowing more equity to pedestrians and giving access and equity to pedestrians and dwellers to enjoy their cities. Eventually, we pollute so much and we rely on filtration as a technology that will save us. So to address all these topics, we've gathered the experts that will address these topics from a different point of view. And I'm more than happy to pass it back to Mitch to start sharing their insights and perspectives. Mitch?
Thanks a lot, Dr. Ed. Really appreciate it. So, very interesting beginning of our talk here. So, I want to start off with a few questions to our panelists, and one is, as we talk about ESG, what does ESG stand for in the context of air quality and filtration? Dr. Ramaswamy, would you start that one off for us?
Dr. Ramaswamy have some difficulty to join. Please, you can start.
Okay, well, then let's go ahead and Paul, do you have any insight to that as well?
Well, I think that when we look at air filtration and ESG, I mean, what we tend to do is look at the sustainability criteria and put them into 4 different theme areas: environment, labor and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. And by the nature of air filtration itself, of course, we tend to lean towards the environment, right? By the nature. We're impacting air pollution. We're looking at product use and product end of life. Those types of things are natural when you're looking at air filtration. And of course, when you're, as Dr. Alatar mentioned, energy consumption is absolutely critical. And a lot of technology has been spent, a lot of energy has been used to actually look at lower profile, lower energy consumption filtration systems. And I think that ESG is very keen in that area for our industry. I think an interesting insight, though, and one that I won't say it's overlooked at all, but you know, when COVID took place, it heightened the awareness of indoor air quality. And all of a sudden, a number of our employers in general, were communicating to their employee base the types of filters that they were using and why they were using them, right? We moved up the ladder, if you will, in MERV rating or F rating, or even to HEPA filtration in some of the workplaces. When you look at the ethics component of ESG, something to keep in mind is responsible information management. And that might be a tool that we as a society can use to help inform our employee base. You know, is it a selling tool when you're interviewing people or people are coming in, they may ask the question, so what kind of an environment am I working in? Do you have HEPA filtration? Are you MERV 13? What have you done in order to protect me in the workplace? Now that we're starting to see more and more workers coming back. So I think generally speaking, you know, just to kind of open up the floor a little bit, by its nature, air filtration is absolutely critical in how we go about measuring our ESG metrics, and how we go about improving air filtration is critical to the success of one who might be in the process of perhaps of even certifying their ESG position.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much. Lisa, do you have a comment on this as well?
Hi, thank you. You know, ESG is not necessarily something that everyone in air filtration knows about, and this is something that I have been learning about. But one of the things that I think is most important after you consider the environment and the social is the governance part. And when we're talking about the governance, that is, how do we apply that to the companies that are in this business in filtration? What are they doing to make the process from cradle to cradle more efficient, using materials that are recyclable and reusable? All of these things are going to be a reflection back onto them on what they're doing to leave a positive impression and not a negative impact on our society. So I think that's something that maybe we don't think a lot about when we think about ESG, but it really is crucial to the players that are involved in the manufacturing of filtration. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Bruce, do you have some input on this question as well?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's great that both Paul and Lisa went to the less obvious part of ESG, because I think focusing on the environmental piece of this is typically where it's easy to go. But of course, the social and the governance piece are extremely important. I think we're going to address in other questions more around energy specifically. So we'll get there later. But I do think, just to add a bit to the previous comments, on the social side of this, there's of course different contributions depending on what we do in filtration. You know, I happen to work at a media manufacturer and supplier, so you know we have to be very thoughtful about sourcing materials. When we source cellulose and glass fibers, we want to make sure that we're thinking about fair trade and you know, deforestation, and making sure that responsible decisions are made along the supply chain, the value chain as a maker. So we have a specific person in our company, and I think a lot of companies now are getting more focused on having someone that is there looking at every decision that's made along the supply chain. And my last comment, I think, would be on the governance piece. We've seen in Europe, which quite often leads the way in moving products towards more knowledge base around the environmental impacts, are EPDs, or environmental product declarations. I mean, I think any measurement tool or anything that we have to hold ourselves to as a standard in the filtration industry is great, because it just puts that information forward, keeps us responsible, keeps us accountable. So I think in addition to the environmental, we've got to really stay focused as a culture within filtration on looking at responsible sourcing and making sure that we stay true through our governance.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate it. And Dr. Agarwal, do you have some input to this question as well?
Yes, thank you. So I think like most of the panelists share, so it's the similar message, but what I would like to share additional is there are two sides of the picture if we see the ESG metrics. One is how to release less emission in the nature. So a lot of government policies are coming, decarbonization is coming. If you see the transportation sector alone, lot of new technologies in the transportation sectors are coming, like fuel cell based, hydrogen based, or hybrid battery based technologies, which are trying to reduce the greenhouse gases emission, or carbon footprint in the emission. So that is coming. So those new technologies are coming, and with these new technologies, new requirement to support those technologies are coming again. So that's where the air filtration is playing a big role. So this is the two way you can support decarbonization, by bringing new technology, but we need filtration again to keep those technology moving, keep them operational. So that's where I think the filtration and this ESG metrics marry together very well, and everything is working in the synergic matter. If I say source of energy, if you're talking about sustainability, what is the source of energy you're using? A lot of companies are moving forward towards using renewable energies, solar energies, or other source of energy to generate your product. If you are looking at the if you're working with supplier or customer, both sides are looking to work with the companies who are adopting more sustainable practice, are able to deliver more sustainable product, because they don't want to change, and they want product to be safe while it's being changed for the operators who are changing the filter. So in those filters, those things were never talked before, especially when you are changing the filter. Nobody thought about what operator will be going through, what are the safety measures for that person. And so those are the things coming together and playing together in a synergic way to reduce the emissions and improve the air quality overall.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Swarna. Appreciate that. Dr. Ramaswamy, you have some
Yes,
input
I'm
in
here.
this?
I am here. I'm sorry. My apologies, Mr. Mesh. Thank you very much. I think probably I'm the first one to speak, but anyhow, all my panelists, distinguished panelists, they covered the point very nicely. I also, being an air conditioning expert, what I'd like to say is the difference between the sustainability normally talk about the environment, social, and economic dimensions, whereas the ESG, environment and social and governance, it provides a structured framework for evaluating the specific performance criteria. And air filters are a very important part of the air conditioning system. And air conditioning is a very basic requirement, especially in this part of the world. So we call starting from the raw material till the final product, and later the life cycle of the filters. We have to pass through each and every state. We have to talk about all these points: environment, social, and criteria. That probably in the subsequent questions I will also answer it. So nowadays we talk about the green industrial revolution, because we talk about industrial revolution 1, 2, 3. So this green industrial revolution, the manufacturers of these filters, really, they have to, for example, the raw material. I think Dr. Cruz has talked about various type of material. So each aluminum is highly energy intensity. So everybody should now focus on the green industrial revolution point. That's what I want to say in this point. So subsequently, I will answer the other questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dr. Ramaswamy. We have time for one more comment. And Richard, could you comment on that question as well?
Sure, Mitch. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of the other panelists have summed it up, but I think ESG, in my view, is a set of considerations or a framework to assess an organization's ability to look at its processes on performance, on the various elements of sustainability and ethical issues. But in the context of air filtration or air technology or clean air, I think on the environmental side, I think we've got to consider the big 4 or 5 areas that we've probably got to address going forward. And some of the other panelists mentioned these, and that's energy usage and efficiency. I think it's all driven, of course, by climate change and climate change strategy. It's also driven by waste reduction and biodiversity. And of course, adding to that then the greenhouse gases that we emit and the carbon footprint we have. And I think, as I had said earlier, we've grown up in this linear society. We have established this linear society: build, own, throw away, build, own, throw away. And that linear operation needs to change if we're going to address the 3 pillars of ESG going forward across organizations. And that needs to look, we'll need to look at that as a whole life cycle. On the rights, there's a UN right, for example, to breathe clean air. And we don't think of that in the social element at all in ethics. So that's a basic change that need to change. And I think if we look at the top 8 industrial processes across the globe, energy, mining and mineral, chemical, food and beverage, IT, data centers, and all that issues associated with that, transportation, construction, and food and beverage, we all consume products, processes, etc., from all those big 8. And if you think about that, if you go back to the set of considerations I mentioned at the outset for the framework for those organizations, those are the pillars that they will need to build the next element of ESG on for clean air and sustainability. So that's my thoughts.
Great. Thanks, Richard. Really appreciate that. We do have, before we move on here, I do have a couple of questions from our audience, and I would like to ask one of those here at this point. And the first one is, should we be developing the UVC and filtration applications together? This would be for defined applications, sizing, measurement, and expected outcomes if we did that. If anyone would like to pick that question up.
Sorry, Mitch, can you repeat the question once again? Sorry.
Okay. Should we be developing the UVC and filtration applications together?
From my point of view, yeah, please. If somebody is interested, they can answer it. From my point of view, I say yes or no, because as such, being an expert on air conditioning side, my focus is mostly on the filtration for the air conditioning applications in that. Maybe other panelists can answer for that, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We have a few other questions, but I think we're going to go ahead and put those in the context of our other questions as well. So our next question is, how can ESG metrics and energy saving be struck when employing filtration technologies? Bruce?
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. And I'm glad to lead off on that question. As mentioned, I happen to work for a manufacturer of filter media. So that puts us in a position to be looking at something that can be oversized in an energy consumption situation. And the reason for that is threefold. I mean, filter media typically is the majority of the material in a filter. Physically, we're finding that that's responsible for pressure drop, which of course has real applications to energy consumption. The understanding there being that the lower the pressure drop, the less work a fan has to do. Of course, that is important in energy outcomes as well. And dust holding capacity. Dr. Iyad, in the beginning of when sharing his slides, showed that there's basically the disposal process, but for us, lengthening the life process is a very feasible way to kind of help in the industry with ESG metrics. And so we can impact all of those things through the work that I'm doing in my company. So I'm very focused on that. And some statistics to share, some of us certainly know this, but I think it's always eye-opening to understand the contribution that commercial buildings have overall. As much as half the greenhouse emissions, at least in the US, are responsible from buildings and plants. And the HVAC system is responsible for 40 to as much as 60% of the energy burden. Of course, 30% of that coming from air filtration. So there's an oversized impact on the energy output of buildings based on filtration. So the obvious there is that, one of the best things that can be done is to try to reduce that pressure drop, to keep innovating to make sure that, we're meeting the lowest qualification to reduce energy output. One more comment, Mitch, and I'm sure our other panelists are going to have some great comments here. But when we look at commercial buildings, I think that there's a radical example that helps us talk about energy, which is data centers. Data centers in filtration are certainly getting more interest. Recently, I was at the AHR show in Chicago, and there were a few panel sessions on filtration specific to data centers. But with over 8,000 of these huge energy consuming buildings or around the world, some of them taking as much as 100 times the energy of a normal commercial building or the equivalent in energy of a small US town. This is the kind of building where I think we can really focus as an organization or as an industry and really support those energy efficiencies through the filtration process. So in short, I would say, again, getting pressure drop down across filters is probably the quickest and easiest way that we as an industry can impact and help the energy burden. And of course, that lowers greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one very tangible way that we can support within the industry outcomes for ESG.
Okay. Dr. Agarwal, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thanks, Mitch. Very good, Mr. Bruce. I totally agree with that. I think when you want to reduce the energy, you have to assess the life cycle of the product from beginning, from raw material, like Bruce is from H&V. So they source their cellulose fiber from somebody or polymeric fiber and make a media out of it or paper out of it. So you have to consider from raw material to the final end product. When you're disposing it, it's done. It's so you have to see the raw material conversion to a paper or filter material, and then converting the filter paper into a usable filter product basically. And then once you have convert into a filter product, you are packaging and shipping that product. How the energy cost, the transportation cost, because everything is consuming energy. You can't do anything without energy. So at every single point you consume the energy, you have to think how you can minimize the energy. One way is Bruce already covered, so I won't go there. But another way is how, when you are sourcing the raw material, when you are making a paper, when you are converting that paper into a filter product, how you can reduce the energy consumption during those processes, those conversion. You need to see that, how you can minimize the waste. You have to see that and use renewable energy sources like I previously mentioned because everything you are running a machine or anything, you need power. And using a renewable power from the renewable sources, that is very important. And besides product efficiency, I think one dimension is also how to make the product smaller and lighter. That is also very crucial for a lot of sectors, because if you are transporting a product larger, it is more space it takes. Heavier it is, of course, more energy it will burn over the time while it's being transported. If it is on a mobile, if it is in the transportation sector, not in residential sector, for example, if it's on a car, on a vehicle or aeroplane, especially where weight is very crucial. So you have to see how you can produce the smallest possible filter with lightest possible weight, with longest possible life, without affecting filter performance basically, and keep its operational cost to the minimal, like during operation. Those things are very important. And finally, when you're disposing it, how to minimize the disposable cost for the product. Can you reuse it? How you can reuse it? How you can recycle it? So lot of those things need to be considered now when you are developing a product, and you have to think from that perspective to meet the ESG metric and save the energy here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Ramaswamy?
Yes, thank you. So as the question is how this ESG matrices and energy saving will be struck, basically. So energy saving, the moment when we talk about energy saving, the terminology, we always talk about the energy efficiency. And energy efficiency now when we talk from all the stakeholders, like Dr. Bruce was telling, being an air conditioning specialist, generally it starts from the design, conceptual design, like he was talking about the pressure drop of the air handling unit. So starting from that point, each process, manufacturing, even might design it also, because now if you see ASHRAE standards and ARI standards, they put a lot of stringent requirement of fresh air unit and the filtration levels. So they always, because of recent COVID issues and all the thing, so the pressure is more on the designer, and the static pressure of the blowers, it keeps on increasing. So where is energy efficiency? Then other side, we talk about energy efficiency ratio, seasonal energy efficiency ratio. So many things are coming on that. So as they are also telling us, full life cycle of the tank energy saving is starting from the raw material production side. There is one side from the manufacturing side. When it comes to the use of applications of the filters, mainly on air conditioning. It starts from the design, and then again the operation and maintenance, the facilities management, that people should also maintain the filters properly. If they don't maintain properly, and again the filters will get choked, and that will also consume more energy efficiency in that. In addition to that, we should also insist, as I told you, the green revolution, green industrial revolution for the filter manufacturing industries. Because now we talk about, everybody talks about renewable energy, and very less talk about the energy efficiency. Anybody who talks about the renewable energy, then they are given more importance. But we should always talk about the energy efficiency. First comes energy efficiency. Renewables, okay, in the manufacturing side, people should understand. That means the filter manufacturer should understand. He should always see how much is a carbon footprint from the raw materials, what they are coming. So in that, they should work out. So these are the points really I want to address it in that. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ramaswamy. Paul, I'd like to have you comment on that, and I would also have another question here, so maybe we can you can answer this at the same time if you don't mind. As we've seen and discussed in our changing world and the need of filtration in industries, is the current technology sufficient enough to attack future problems as well?
Well, let me first start with just adding to what the other panelists have said on air filters and design being so critical. It's absolutely true. There's no question that enhancing the low pressure drop of an air filter is critical, but I do think we have to keep in mind that it's part of the system. And if the system itself can't accommodate the improvements in an air filter, then it's a bit lost, right? You know, so when we look at energy use, if we don't have variable speed fans to take advantage of that lower pressure drop, it's a bit lost. If you have air restriction on the outbound side that prevents you from having higher airflows, it's a bit lost. So I think as air filter specialists or as filtration specialists, we have to keep in mind the entire infrastructure of use of the air filters themselves. To answer the question, is our technology today, I think your question, I'm going to paraphrase, is right. The technology today capable of supporting it? I think it is. Mm-hmm. If you look at some of the advances that have in fact taken place and the scope of capabilities of the portfolio of filters available in today's society, mm-hmm. I think the proper use of them and the upgrading of entire systems. I mean, if you look at some of our colleagues are involved in LEED buildings, right? If you have the mindset of creating an environment where you can take advantage of today's technologies, I think it's more than available. Mm-hmm. But we are typically a relatively slow-moving industry. And so I think the adoption of those technologies is critical. And there isn't a better time than with the awareness that we have of ESG and IAQ that we have today. I hope that helps some, Mitch.
Great. Thanks a lot, Paul. Yes, it does, I think. Richard, do you have some input to this question as well? And also I have another comment, if you could comment on this as well. ESG seems to bring in a healthy focus to us in general. Do you have some kind of an idea on how we can put all of those assumptions together in IAQ in general? Richard?
Yeah, I think IAQ is and IEQ is a very interesting area. I think I'm just going back to the December meeting we held, our annual conference, and I've been involved, I think, now in 5 annual conferences with Christine and yourself, Mitch, over the years. And this year we focused a little bit more on new technologies and innovative technologies that are coming along. And this year we heard a lot about, healthy buildings of the future, technologies that are coming along, for instance, and we don't talk a lot about this, is the whole area of hot gas filtration. We talk a lot about HVAC and all that, but what about the gases that come out of our incinerators, minerals, cement plants, power generation plants, blasts we use every day? And there was a very interesting talk by Dr. Ian Chisholm on ceramic filters and catalytic filters that they're developing in that business, you know, that can take out NOx, SOx, and VOCs at source. That was a very interesting thing to think differently about the innovations of the future. I also think we might want to think about, you know, I'm sitting in a building right now where it's a 1960s building, but I'm using solar, storage, and a heat pump to generate my heat and so think differently, you know, and I've put that in the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm not using the traditional, you know, pollutant combustion systems, you know, to heat my home. So that's just different. And my air filtration system is natural air. Why? Because I'm in a relatively clean environment. I go back to the point that Dr. Ayad spoke about, you know, we're going to go from, you know, we're going to go from 50% to 70% people by 2050 in cities. That's a big shift. So maybe we need to be thinking about buildings of the future. And if we're thinking then about that healthy focus, we will be living in buildings of the future. And we can adopt buildings of the past to actually reflect that. I go back to one thing Bruce said, data centers, they're unbelievable, data storage. I mean, we're all living with IT. We're talking on IT right now. There's listeners on IT. And if you go into one step further than that, the semicon sector, you know, we're all buying cars or buying vehicles or buying transportation systems on planes. And we're on computer chips right now. They all require data systems to run. And that is a big area for development of the future. And if we could only take the energy from a data center and transition that straight into some other form of energy that we could all use, that'd be fantastic. We'd have the heating and cooling system that we require, that I'm living with in my home right now.
Yeah,
so there's
right.
a practical example of maybe thinking about this in a different way.
Great.
I'd like to comment, Mitch, if you allow me, and then
Sure.
I'd like to give the chance to Dr. Agarwal. A very quick comment on what Dr. Richard has said. It's, you know, bullseye. I think the much earlier question to ask is, why are we polluting so much? And then having to worry about, let me go back to a broken system that my anthropogenic emission is so massive. And then I give a call to this filtration technologies and say, I gotta have enough technology to capture it. The real question to ask is, why are we polluting so much? Go back to the sources and re-examine this. So that's one point. The second point is, having or availing the technology does not justify the pollution action. It does not give us the right to go back and pollute it. Dr. Richard said this very important point is, if my air is so clean outdoor, I'll just open the window and get fresh air. We also address another aspect. What if I don't have access to central air conditioning, either because I am in a developing country that doesn't give me that luxury, or I'm such an old country where retrofitting is, you know, not allowed or not feasible, and therefore I have to rely on regular ventilation. Quick point on what Bruce has said, pressure drop. Pressure drop, certainly order of the day and name of the game. Important question to ask is, how can I not overcome only the pressure drop, but what is the pressure drop coming from? Why is always high efficiency filters are associated with high pressure drop? Media technology has gotten so advanced today that we can get the efficiency required, the very high particle capture efficiency at a much lower pressure drop. So things are changing. We got to change the way we live and the way we deal with our environment, but also filter selection in general is different. And again, I want to reiterate this. Having the technology itself does not justify that. No problem. I can have 10 stages of filtration, one for PM 2.5, one for PM1, one for formaldehyde, one for H2S. It's impossible. It's not going to work. We don't have the energy for it. We're already struggling, as Bruce said and Dr. Richard said, we're already struggling trying to convince air handling unit manufacturers to have an additional stage for gaseous filtration. All the focus now is on particulate filtration. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. Swarna, do you want to add something real quickly?
Yes, like Dr. Iyad covered at the end, I wanted to focus that we all the time when we talk about air filtration, we talk about particulate filtration. Now at some level we talk about bacteria and virus removal too, and I totally agree. We need to figure, but I see as a future VOC removal as well as pollutant gases removal, that would be a big sector as well, because no matter the outside air is coming in or where you are, even in your houses, you have so many VOCs, and those all are harmful for your health. I think that is also an emerging sector where you will not only focus, or you will not only need to have particulate removal, but also VOCs or gases removal from the indoor air as well, because they are present in the indoor. And you need to combine those two technologies together. There are ways available, but how to make it less expensive, how to make it energy efficient, I think that's the next challenge we have to go, how we can do both together. And also virus removal is also coming, bacterial virus removal, that already happened with the alpha level filtration media, but combining those two together, VOCs plus particulate matter removal at high energy efficiency with high efficiency for longer life, I think those are the next generation challenges. We need to see what kind of material we can use, what kind of new technology we can incorporate to meet these sustainability environmental goals, keeping in the mind of the best air quality.
Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna have to move on to the next, our next question here, and actually, I would like to ask Lisa a couple questions here, since you're very, very well versed in this. Two things, Lisa. One is, what's the actual cost of filter manufacturing from cradle to grave? And is there any legislation for IAQ? If yes, can you tell us what it is?
Well, I'll start with a question about legislation. That is something that differs not only per country, but per state here in the United States. There is not any that I am aware of that is reinforced or where it's implemented to, where it's actually enforced. Sorry, that's the word I was going for. So I think we have a really long way to go when it comes to that. But I know there's a lot of folks working on that. ASHRAE, EPA, even CDC are working on putting those things into place. And I think it's just a matter of time before we see that happening. So,
Okay.
and to address the cost of filter manufacturing, I put together this, basically, you have to consider the actual cost of the filter manufacturing. You need to consider the whole process, the various factors. There's specifics, and those can vary depending on the materials used, the complexity of the filtration system, and the scale of production. But some of the things that we've already discussed, but I'll review, is we have to consider shipping and receiving of the products pre and post manufacturing. We have to consider warehousing a product and the costs involved with running those facilities in those buildings, material costs, labor costs in both the production and replacement and recycling, as well as preventative maintenance. The production processes itself, testing, research, development, disassembly and recycling, certification and compliance. All of these impact the principles in the manufacturing of filters. You have to consider the total life cycle of the filters. So from the raw material extraction to the use of the filters, to the reuse or recyclability or end of life. So all of those things factor into the eventual cost. Recycling and using sustainable recyclable media and resources can be cost intrusive upfront, but ultimately this can average out over the lifetime of the filter with the reusability of the filtration systems and products used. Using metal frames with replaceable media instead of disposable cardboard and media can save a tremendous amount of resources and spare landfills from tons of waste, as well as reduce shipping weight, costs, and energy required to move that product. So initial costs, filter manufacturing may be higher by implementing the nonlinear strategy, but companies implementing the strategy, they often find long-term benefits with reduced environmental impact, enhanced brand reputation, and potential cost savings through the extended product life and the resource efficiency. So I think we're going to see there's going to be a paradigm shift towards a more sustainable and responsible future that will not only address the immediate concerns of air quality, but also ensures that the entire life cycle of filtration systems is designed to contribute positively to both society and the environment.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Lisa. Paul, do you have any input to that question as well?
Well, it's kind of hard to add to Lisa covered nearly every variable. I just reinforce, I think, a couple of things. Don't lose sight of transportation costs. Raw materials to media production, as Bruce was talking about, media production to filter manufacturer, filter manufacturer to distributor, distributor to end user, and then, of course, in reverse in some ways. So I think that's a cost that sometimes gets a little bit lost, but certainly very important when we look at environmental impact as well. So cost and environment. And then the only other thing that I would add, Mitch, is just reinforcing Lisa's comments on circularity and recycling. If you look at the functionality of a frame, and Lisa used this example as well, but if you look at the functionality of a frame, it really is to hold the active elements of filtration. Mm-hmm. When the active elements of filtration are spent or at the end of their life, is that frame at the end of its life? Generally speaking, no. Mm-hmm. Why we don't, and Dr. Alatar opened up with, how can we be more creative? There's an opportunity there for us to not build, own, dispose, but rather build, own, and reuse an element that really is not at the end of its life cycle, at the end of the use of the critical filtering element.
Great. Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate that. Dr. Ramaswamy, do you have some input to that question as well?
Yes, yes. As I, my panelists have told, this air pollution and climate change both are intrinsically linked. Now, they were asking about the legislation about the indoor air quality. And Dr. Lisa has told that every state has different rules. And now the professional bodies like ASHRAE, every year they keep on changing in their rules. For example, I'm telling you, in this part of the world, in Middle East, in GCC, Dr. Yad was telling probably if you have, I think you can open the windows, you can get the fresh air. But if you see in this part of the world, GCC, when the outside temperature goes almost 49, 50 degrees centigrade, just imagine. So we need all the time in an enclosed environment. So once the air conditioning system is installed, the life cycle of the air handling unit, I have seen some of the air handling units are even working more than about 30 years. Now, the air is now treated and sent through the ducting. Now, NADCA, National Association of Duct Cleaning, they recommend that the duct should be cleaned every 4 to 5 years to keep the pathogens and mold growth to minimize. Now, but that is very expensive. Now, when we go to the people, to the legislation people here, and there is no rule here in this part of the world. So this all. So that's what, finally, what I mean to say is the necessity is the mother of invention. And now we have so much advanced technologies in every field, whether it is a design or whether it is in production or whether it is in maintenance and facilities management. We have so much advanced tools. We as an engineers, as a scientist, probably, because now which is driving? The driving is the climate crisis. Recently in Dubai, we have a COP28, and there is a great amount of fund has been generated for the green to address this issue. And each one of us, many of these questions, they're talking air filtration is a small one. A small one also makes a lot of things. Air conditioning in this part of the world, especially in the east part of the world, it is a necessity. It is not a luxurious item. Those days have gone. So necessity is the mother of the invention. And we daily, the technology will definitely help us. It is helping us, and it is going to help us in the future also. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ramaswamy. Bruce, I think you said you wanted to comment on this question as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to follow up on, but one comment I would have, and this is a great discussion, is it's easy for us, I think, within the industry to be internally focused on our technology, on our innovation, on understanding the outcomes of, you know, our different filter solutions, how we manufacture. But I think if we zoom way out, you know, and this will touch on the enforcement and regulation piece of this. Ultimately, it's money that makes all of this go. And so when we talk about a building is ultimately run by someone who has a budget, and they're allocating dollars. So it's always coming back to the fact of, you know, is there a profitable model for a building owner or the people that are responsible for making filtration choices? And so this will get to the ESG kind of connection piece with regulations, but I think that there's a big opportunity for us to be telling our story better as a filtration industry, because there's definitely opportunities to show savings, and we all have different pieces of information to support that. But I don't think that we've holistically as an industry done a good job convincing building owners, boards of directors, others who have control of budget, that ultimately filtration is a great way to decarbonize your building. Filtration is a really great way to reduce energy consumption. So I think, you know, since there's no governing body that's really policing a lot of these pieces, I think it's really up to us as an industry to tell our story better and to help influence. And my last comment on that, to our favorite topic of data centers within buildings, is, you know, we just learned that as of this year, there's now new reporting requirements by the SEC, who are expecting from 2025 to see reporting about, you know, what are data centers doing to reduce their carbon footprint. That's massive, because that means we may not need to lean in to building owners and others, but they may be coming to us soon to look for solutions, because again, it's related to finance and not just legislation or government oversight. So we have to always kind of go back to the dollar, trace the money, and do a really good job to try to influence and help those who are spending the money understand the advantages of our great technology and how it benefits them.
Great. Thanks, Bruce.
Maybe Nick, just add to that with one more comment. I think just to sum up maybe something that Lisa put down, I think one of the models that a lot of people are looking at now is in the industry is total cost of ownership, or ROI. And I think that brings in a different perspective. Also, I think just to add to that point, I think we've got to show as an industry it can be cheaper and more cost efficient to go down this route. And we're not good at telling that. We're not good at showing that, or even developing the models to show that. And I think the industry needs to actually show models that can do that. And finally, I think, you know, there's a carrot and the stick on the reinforcement and the regulation. But I think to go back to Dr. Ramaswamy's point, you know, climate change, the climate crisis will drive that change in mindset. It has to. Because if we don't, we're going to end up with a more polluted world, a worse world. You know, we're going to have more hot and cold issues around the world. We're going to have more of this heating and cooling issue. And that's going to drive this unsustainable scenario for clean air. And if companies need to bring on an ESG model, they're going to have to start showing within the big 8 I mentioned earlier, but also across the globe. Governments are going to then have to think about how they're going to bring that model across the whole of society, rather than just a piecemeal scenario today.
Great.
Thank you, Mitch. If you allow me, I know I'm the next one, but I wanted to also, I'm glad that Dr. Richard has commented on this. I have 4 quick comments that will maybe be relevant to what everybody said. Number 1, filtration is an engineering process. In order to do that, I need to know what I'm up against. I need to characterize what pollutants that I need to capture. Concentration, particle size distribution, whatever it is. Now, second point is rethink the system. I need to rethink the system. Why are we focused so much on acquiring HVAC systems to get thermal comfort, acquiring filters to get air quality? Why don't we just say, I want the commodity, I want the access to the service, and then I give back the ownership to the company that manufactures the filters and the air quality. So also they be held responsible for the disposal issue, which I hope we have time, we think about, we address that today. My 4th point is we gotta think in a way that the goods that we have today that we've used are becoming the resource of tomorrow. Because I cannot just, as Dr. Richard also reinforced, I cannot just take, make, and then waste. This linear system is now being quantified. We're gonna fall short very, very soon. So these are the 4 points, and I'll be more than happy if somebody comments on this.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate that. Good answer. Now I want to kind of move to another question here, and that's how many layers of supply chain should filter manufacturers adhere to achieve ESG metrics? Let's see. I think, Paul, would you mind commenting on that?
Yeah, sure, Mitch.
Thanks.
Well, I don't, well, certainly it's not legislated, right? You know, in what direction, or I should say how many layers, but I think the general rule of thumb is for a filter manufacturer to do the diligence similarly in both directions of the value chain. So let me use an example. So if you're going forward in the value chain, you manufacture a filter, you do your diligence when you're hiring your employee to sell that filter, right? That they have the same, they have to go through corruption testing and anti-competitive practices, and they're going to be good employees, right? That do follow the culture that you and your company have. Subsequently, the next level, a lot in our industry, in filtration, generally speaking, there's a lot of distributors as well. And we go through the diligence of making sure that those distributors follow the same type of rules that we have, right? And what do you generally do? You talk to them about their financials, you talk to them about their approach to business, make sure that they're following the rules that you would follow, right? And generally speaking, there's an agreement that's signed that secures that. So, but there's always going to be an element of trust. So you trust them and you verify, right? Trust and verify. I think that same process holds true for the suppliers to the filter manufacturer as well. So you have media, frames, and adhesive suppliers that are your partners, and it's quite a concentrated marketplace. So regardless of who you select as your partner, generally you're selecting them so based on criteria, not just price, not just performance, but do they have the culture that supports the innovation, perhaps, their approach towards the other elements of ESG that are consistent with you and your company. When you look at the raw materials, I think Bruce alluded to on the media side, you know, whether it's glass fiber or synthetics that are used or cellulose, you're going to want to make sure that they're procuring them in a sustainable way, sustainable procurement. And you're not necessarily going to need to understand all the details of how it's done, but rather understand the scope. So again, the diligence of making sure that you understand what they're doing so that they're in support, they and their suppliers are in support of your approach for your company. So general rule of thumb, I would say, is 2 in each direction. But of course, you know, a number of companies that I'm familiar with go even deeper. But in our industry, once you go deeper, you're starting to get into pure commodity raw materials. And I think that's a bit of a challenge because that's also quite concentrated. And those companies, generally speaking, would not be in business if they did not follow certain levels of ESG.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Dr. Iyad, would you comment on that question as well?
Yeah, thank you much. I think Paul covered everything, but I just wanted to say that something that Paul kind of highlighted is that there is also an ethical part that we may not be able, at least right now, to legislate. You know, we won't be able to chase every particle downstream and upstream. We have to be driven by this ethical, you know, obligation. We've seen how in the pandemic there was no legislation, and I know there is a great question in the Q&A about legislation. But look, masks were legislated, they were implemented almost so strictly. You can't fly in an airline or, you know, have a seat in an aircraft if the mask is not snug. What does that tell us? It can be done. It's just a matter of actually getting everybody in the same table and say, listen, if you don't do it, you're posing a risk to other people. There's a huge or emerging conversation now about clustering people in cities. We've seen how our so-called smart cities were locked down. What does that tell you? That is basically we gave up because eventually they became centers for virus transmission. They became a catalyst for virus transmission. I think our kids and probably grandchildren will basically hold us responsible for what we've done prior to 2020, and then showing up after 2020 saying, guess what? We've got these standards. I've been telling you maybe the wrong thing. I need to have a new version. That's fine. But I think as Dr. Richard, Bruce, and Paul have said, Dr. Amaswamy, we have what it takes. We have what it takes. Part of the ESG should be also the way we look at manufacturing, the way we look what services we give our labor and manufacturing plants, where we're getting our supply chain from, and then eventually to disposal, because not just, it's a loaded filter, I give it to someone at a low paying job, labor, to face the consequences of dealing with a loaded filter. This used filter could be toxic, could be contaminated. So not respecting that aspect certainly has nothing to do with ESG. So I would conclude with that point. We need to be upfront with the issues. We seem to dance around the issues. We love the ESG, it sounds so good, but when it comes down, it's almost a painful process because we need to change everything. Nobody's willing to give up a car. Nobody's willing to give a single benevolence of the way we live and operate, generate and use power and combust fossil fuel responsibly. So that's my point tonight. Change the way we live. And then certainly we won't have so much pollution to worry about, because I don't think any consultant will allow me to have 10 stages of filtration for every single pollutant that exists in the urban air.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Just to add to maybe one more point to that, I think if we think of that paradigm shift in pollution to also link it to health of the population going forward, I think that's a huge paradigm shift as well. And I don't think we've talked about that at all on this conference. But healthcare and pharma is built upon the fact that we will get sick. Something will happen to us during our lifetime. If we have a more healthy environment and a more healthy, unpolluted environment, and I go back to the point you mentioned earlier, the ideal world would be minimize the amount of pollution we create in the first place. That's the simple scenario. Now, if we were to then think about that and think about, the buildings, the environment, the energy, the systems that we create in order that do cause the pollution, then all of a sudden we would have a complete paradigm shift in the way we focus this. And it won't be changed, but I think there's changes on the way. I mean, the movement towards energy is going that way. Companies are adopting more of an ESG approach, I think, in general across the globe. They want to be seen because they'll be investable for the future if they're cleaner and if they're greener. So I think that's a big shift I think we've got to think about also going forward. And I think the value creation from industries, from companies that are cleaner will command a premium going forward as well. So that's an interesting scenario that we may want to think about.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Richard. Now, we have a couple of questions here I wanted to ask from our audience. If I can have input from anyone here. One is concerning foam filters. How reliable and durable are they? And can they be used how are they used in today's air filtration?
Mitch, if you don't mind, I'd like to take this question. I just wanted to address to the audience when addressing a question, WFI does not qualify products or solutions. We're here to address the concept. So if I would like to address the legislation question, if you allow me.
Okay, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Shall I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Yes, I think this is a critical question. And then as Paul said, we don't right now have anything that governs how we deal with air filters, the way we manufacture them and install them. I think what is the order of the day is employing an aerosol monitoring system. I have the right to know what and air quality. What kind of air quality I'm inhaling? If the system fails, a notification should be sent to my smartphone. I'm living in 2023. I expect the technology to serve me, not that I serve the technology. Filters are in smarter system. They have what it takes to get me a high efficiency at a much lower pressure drop. We talked about this, but we can integrate other technologies like sensors to be able to notify me whether or not the indoor space is actually fit to occupy, whether it's a data center, as Bruce said, or whether it's educational facilities or a hospital. We need to confront and implement so-called the standards we're spreading around the globe. We're spreading standards that poorly adhered to, and then we're going back and asking, why aren't we achieving the results that we want to? So legislation is going to be the name of the game, but governments will have to really play their part. Private sectors and industry leaders will have to come up and say, we are capable of doing this, and here's how.
Okay, great. Good points, Ed. Very good points. Lisa, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that to say that, you know, ultimately what we need to be doing is quantifying, right, the overall cost of inaction. So when we can show this is the loss that's actually happening because you have not implemented the strategies that can save you money, I think that's how we're going to get people to really see the need for implementing the strategies as well as enforcing them.
Okay, great. You know, while you're on that subject, Lisa, is there an approach to develop a global ESG metrics? Is there a movement to establish that? Do you know?
Well, I often follow the World Health Organization when it comes to getting a pulse on the global perspective. They update regularly on air quality and its effects. Obviously, we're all here today because we all believe in the importance of filtration and indoor air quality. And it starts with opportunities like this to create the discussion and to bring awareness and to move it forward.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to add to that question as well? All right.
Yes, myself, can I answer?
Sure.
Yeah, I think Dr. Yat, they were talking about the legislation, yes. And plus Dr. Bruce also talking about the cost of healthy building. I have some data, statistical data. Recently, I read from this Harvard Business Review. The cost to implement healthy buildings practice is only $40 per person per year. To achieve healthy buildings, and while the productivity of the benefits are approximately $6,500 per person per year. This is the data. So that itself shows this is the driving mechanism, one, when it comes to economics. Because most of the time, the people who are taking the policy decision makers, they focus only on the budget and finance. But we being scientists and engineers, probably we have the data. The data will definitely make them to understand, to make the correct legislation in the respective local conditions, local practices. For example, in UAE, they have developed Estadama. So they talk about mostly the healthy building practices. So Dr. Isa was telling WHO is now developing a lot of standards. So these standards should be also, they should work together to develop this type of ESG matrices. So that definitely will help us to formulate, and then the wisdom of everybody should be used to finally, as I told you, the air pollution and climate crisis, interestingly, they are related. If you don't address it, whatever the international protocols, now we talk about COP, all this Kyoto protocol, whatever we are talking, and the average temperature of the earth is going to increase. And now it is our human responsibility to control below 1.5 degrees centigrade. So as again, most of the comments they talk, air filtration is not that much compared to the chiller load. As an air conditioning man, if you take a chiller consumes almost 40 to 50% of the total load of an air conditioning system. But the air quality, when it comes to the filters, if I don't treat it, if I don't maintain it, and it costs the life of the building, human being. So that is more important. So if all these points are taken into account, probably the legislation to the individual countries, individual states will definitely take the policymakers, the politicians. Ultimately, we need to feed them the correct figures, the correct data to them in that. That's all. That is my comment. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Ramaswamy. We do have one question from the audience here. Mohammed, I think you had raised your hand, and you could you go ahead and answer or ask your question? Mohammed Hussein? Okay.
Mitch,
right.
if you don't mind, do you mind if we go to the last question to
Sure. I'm
we
ready
get
to go
Dr.
right now.
Agrawal to at least address it because we have limited time.
Right. Okay, we'll talk about how circular economy metrics propel ESG achievements. We have Dr. Agrawal.
Thank you, Mitch. I think during all this session for last 60 minutes, we have been already talking about it, and we have already covered in different questions because they are all like interweaved together. So I would not like to repeat what we have talked, but like I will just go quickly. Resources, material selection, energy, water, logistic and distribution, those are part of it. Life cycle assessment, we already talked about it, how it contribute. Waste reduction, supply chain partner selections. Yes, I think what we didn't talk is employee engagement and training, how to make our employees aware of what are the ESG principles, what is the value of energy saving, how to save the energies, what is our environmental responsibilities, and have some Kaizen events around the companies or some extra workshops around the company where all the employees participate in those kind of exercises and come up with more novel ideas, how they can reduce the waste, how they can save the energy, how can they make product faster. And those are very important. I think employee engagement basically, and then monitoring and reporting, we didn't talk about that, how we can implement a monitoring system to track energy uses, emissions, and other ESG metric, and generate reports and share within the companies, basically share with the stakeholders, share with the community to understand what we are doing differently, how we can do differently. And I think also engage with the communities and to understand what are our community needs where every industry is located, and understand the social need and address them. I think this effort is already happening, like investment in the innovations, allocate resources for R&D innovation for more efficient, environmental friendly products, filtration technologies which are meeting our goal of ESG metrics. And I think also being aware of the regulatory and compliances, what are the government regulations, what are the government standard, and follow them, making a practice to follow them.
Great. Bruce, would you like to make a quick comment on that? And then Paul, please.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, I think the original question here that we were looking at is this idea of circular economy. Of course, we can measure the impact of filtration and ESG through a few different approaches. There's cradle to gate, which is what I do when we look at it through our company. There's cradle to grave, which is the disposal of the product. And then there's this idea of cradle to cradle, which is wonderful, but very challenging given the products that we have and the fact that there are contaminants and so on, which we all know. So I think what I might add to this is, instead of trying to find the best way to get to a cradle to cradle economy for us as an industry, perhaps we can continue to look creatively at how to innovate within the supply chain. And I think we've covered over the course of the last hour, that we have a lot of great technology, a lot of great solutions. So I would just kind of push this point again that as an industry, I think we need to become better storytellers to take credit and help educate and raise awareness for how we already can support improved metrics in ESG and reduced footprint as an industry. So the best storyteller wins. And I think that's an area where as an industry, we can do a better job. And I think that's going to help us moving forward.
Absolutely. Good point. Paul, do you have a quick comment to add to that question as well?
Yeah, just for me in closing, I think Bruce said it very, very well. Just me in closing, I think it's very interesting, you know, if you look at the panel and the commentary, the feedback, the narrative that you've heard, that the group has heard today, it really, you know, we tend to be very technical in our approach. Today, it was more about business and ethics and sustainable procurement, things that are beyond the technological advances of our product, but rather how do you treat our product as part of a bigger ecosystem, one that we collectively can improve. So very, very interesting for me. Thank you, Mitch.
Great. Thanks a lot, Paul. Really appreciate it. I thank you all for your comments. Ian, do you have a closing comment here?
Yes, I just wanted to thank all the panelists, the audience. I also want to thank you, Mitch, for moderating among these amazing brains and panelists. Lots of insights to handle. We promised at WFI to bring in the appropriate panelists, and we have. We promised to bring up the key questions and parameters and the pressing issues, and we did. And today we stand in the very beginning at these topics. We cannot put any blueprints in an hour and a half, but we can certainly spark our interest to steer the direction towards how we embrace sustainability. ESG is definitely going to be somewhere where it can make us think well and beyond, as Paul said, acquiring a filter, installing it, and just disposing it in a regular, landfill area. We have massive homework to do. Today is just the beginning. WFI will continue to bring the experts to address the issues so that we can all make a difference. Sustainability is everyone's business. At that point, I'd like to close.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ed. So with that, I want to thank our audience for your participation, and I do want to remind you all that our next program will be on March 19th, which will be the CFSS 2024 program opening session. It'll be focused on global filtration market. If you're new to CFS program, here's a quick review.
So there are so many parameters when it comes to air filtration. Over the years, inventions went from a flat sheet medium to a pleated medium.
We have to move towards a circular economy and sustainability. Today, we operate in a disposable linear society.
Looking at this holistic impact that a building has on its internal and external environments, and the place that IAQ and intelligent building systems, etc., have in making it a reality.
One, we define clean air as air free of pathogens.
Microorganism perspective in the and also this is a very US-centric answer.
Antimicrobial resistance, sure they're moving into water as well.
Technologies that create another problem, such as we've seen with antibiotic resistance.
It requires massive changes in the chemical enterprise.
What should we hear, and what do you want to inspire us to go do next based on these challenges that you're raising?
We need more technology, not less.
Filtration can play a major role in the future of filtration on our planet. And I think there's so many challenges out there. There are so many opportunities.
Yeah, so we want to encourage and empower the next generation in filtration and separation. The Filtration Society and WFI proudly have scholarships and have awarded those to folks in the industry as well. So these are the scholarship winners from over 100 applications we received. These are these individuals were selected to to participate in our CFSS program at no charge. So I want to thank all of our WFI members, and without them, this program could not take place. So thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for their attention. Again, I want to thank all the panelists and all the attendees for your participation. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you again in another Filtration Hour. Thank you.